Wolverine PvP. The madness has begun, and Wolverine is taking over the PvP scene, rightfully so. That was the game mode that he was sort of poised to dominate, and he is delivering in a big way. So naturally, a lot of people trying to get on the Wolverine hype train have been asking me, how do I build my Wolverine for PvP? So in this video, I'm going to give you a breakdown of what I've done and what has worked really well for me. Now, this advice is not necessarily going to guarantee you have a very good Wolverine. There's a lot of things that go into it, including like the card buildup and swords and everything else like that, agent bonus, etc., etc. But I'll give you every single step to show you exactly what goes into making him good. I'll talk about his weaknesses, and we'll show a lot of gameplay content while I'm doing so that you can get a feel for who I think is the second best PvP character in the game now. I'll stand by that. I think Wolverine is the second best PvP character in the game right now. Of course, second only to Jean Grey. Right? Now, saying that, I know it's a bit of a bold statement, so I will follow it up by saying his main weakness is Adam. Right? So he's not a completely flawless character who has no counters. Obviously, he can lose to Jean Greys. Obviously, he can lose to Wolverines that are better than him. And then he obviously has a weakness as a combat type versus blast types. Now, thankfully, there aren't many good blast types in PvP right at the moment. There's basically only Adam, right? Emma's been pushed out of PvP. Other characters have been pushed out of PvP. However, if you have a really strong Adam with a lot of defensive buffs, then your Wolverine is going to find himself struggling. So, depending on the types of opponents that you're taking on, more often than those, more frequently, you may see more or less value in building your Wolverine in one particular way or another. And we'll cover those different ways as we go through the video, but it's a really important thing to showcase him in different scenarios so that you get an idea for what this looks like, and you get an idea for where he's going to be strongest and where he's going to be weakest, because like I said, your mileage may vary. So there you go. He procced my artifact, I killed him, and then he killed me on the follow-up. This is the main way that Wolverine loses. He basically takes too much burst damage in the beginning of a fight, and then he doesn't have enough survivability to last and get kills too long after that. So that's going to be his main weakness. But other than that, he's an absolute powerhouse. And one of the best things about Wolverine is he doesn't even need to be tier 4 to do these things. Of course, tier 4 is going to be a massive buff, and every character gets stronger in PvP at tier 4. None of them get weaker. But for Wolverine, what's actually more important than tier 4, in my opinion, is getting him to, or getting that artifact for him. So I can't stress this enough. The artifact is a non-negotiable part of his build. Without the artifact, I think it's risky to build him for PvP, and it may not be worth your time and effort. And I know you have to build Wolverine now to get Jean Grey anyways, so that kind of gets built in regardless, but it is something to consider. Now, as you'll see here, going toe-to-toe with Jean means you have to have a very tanky PvP build. So in my case, I do have a very tanky PvP build. We one-tap Spider-Man, which obviously feels amazing. We're going to get the kill here on Adam because we had our tier 3 charged up. And what I really love about making... I lost? When did my artifact proc? I thought my artifact had him procced, bruh! Okay, well, whatever. I don't give a shit. Killing Jean twice and killing Spider-Man is something that few characters can do. So losing to Adam really doesn't bother me when a team is being fielded like this, because I could easily swap Wasp or Colossus for Jean or whatever, some other character, and I could dominate that team by just introducing another DPS, right? Having a one DPS team doesn't really work anymore. But piggybacking off of what I said about Wolverine not even needing to be tier 4, I want to show you this highlight here. Odyssey, this top ABX team, they're in the tournament here, and Ionix, good fella here, he goes ahead and fields a level 70 tier 3 Wolverine. Now, he's not a PvP account, right? But take a look at this. Not only does Wolverine survive, spoiler alert, he doesn't even have his artifact triggered, whereas Adam does, and he ends up having more HP at the end of the fight thanks to his auto heal than Jean Grey does. So I know it's just, it's a 10-second clip. There's not a lot going on. I mean, there's a lot going on that you can't see, but there's not a lot going on as far as like, it's just a 3v3 mashup. But for Wolverine to come out of this with more HP than a tier 4 Jean Grey, right? considering that he's the only character on either team who has type disadvantage present, because universals don't have type disadvantage, and there's no speed types here to counter Adam. It just blows my mind. And then it's gonna blow your mind even more when you go over to Ionix's build and you take a look at what he has on his Wolverine, because you're like, oh, okay, big time whale. You know, he's got it. Sure, he's got tier 3 level 70 Wolverine. He hasn't built him up yet, but he's probably got like a brilliant CTP of this or a mighty CTP of that. Oh, he's got an obelisk. It's a 4-second invincibility obelisk. Very cool, my dude. He does have the artifact. Like I said, I think the artifact is non-negotiable. But what about the Uru? What about the Odin's blessings? Oh, okay. He has no Odin's blessings, and he barely has any fucking Uru. Oh, okay, yeah. And then if you take a look at his cards, you'll see, I mean, they're very good. His cards are very good. They're somewhat, actually, they're pretty balanced. I was going to say they're somewhat PvE oriented, but 67% max HP and 42% all defense and 36% crowd control is pretty good, actually, for PvP. That's pretty good. So, yeah, it's still highly impressive that he's able to pull that off, and it just goes to show you how strong Wolverine is. And I think it really just comes down to the artifact. I don't want to stress this too much, but if you have the artifact, I think he's a go to be built for PvP. If not, I think at best he's a sort of a character that can be traded 1 for 1. We're going to do a couple of runs here on, actually, you know what? I have him at the back here. We're going to move him up to the front. We had him at the back because it works. It works really well. But I want to showcase him, so we're going to put him at the front here. We're going to do a couple runs so you guys can see what he looks like against other top metas, and you can also see what other top metas Wolverines look like. Now, as far as the rest of the build goes, okay, so we've established that the artifact is non-negotiable. You absolutely need the artifact. The rest of the build, I think you're probably going to want to aim for Power of Angry Hulk or Binary Power for the ISO 8 set. Binary Power is very defensive, whereas Power of Angry Hulk is very offensive. And if you're wondering which one to choose, oh, do I choose Binary Power or do I choose Power of Angry Hulk? It really depends on how you're going to pair the rest of his build with a CTP. So that's where the big challenge comes in. And remember how I showed you that he can die versus Adam Warlock? Well, that's how you're going to basically decide how to build your Wolverine. So what I want you to do, first of all, when you're building your Wolverine is don't give him a CTP right away. Give him an invincibility obelisk, right? A 5-second invincibility obelisk with guard break immunity, just like Ionix did. Give him one of those, even if he's tier 4, okay? And then run through some Otherworld battle, run through some timeline battle, because I don't know what your card stats look like. I don't know what your sword stats look like, okay? So you need to test that out. I need to turn that off. You need to test that out. Why? Because you need to determine one of two things. You need to determine whether your Wolverine is dying too quickly, or if he's not dying too quickly, but the enemies are not dying too quickly. Those are the two things. So here, for this one, I can say that it wasn't that my Wolverine wasn't dying too quickly. It's that he wasn't doing enough damage. Against this particular team, he wasn't doing enough damage. Now, when you run enough simulations, when you run enough runs, you'll eventually get an idea of which one is more prevalent, right? Is it that your Wolverine is dying too early, or is it that he's not doing enough damage? And that question is all you have to answer. It can be hard to answer, I know, but that question for the most part is what you want to answer. There are a couple of other ways to answer this, like, do you want your Wolverine to be in a stalemate with another Wolverine? If not, then you're going to want to build him more offensive. Or, like, do you want your Wolverine to not get one-tapped by every blast type? You don't want him to get one-tapped? Okay, then you're going to have to build him more defensive, right? So you can answer this question in a couple of different ways, but ultimately you're going to have to fall into one of two categories. Either I want my Wolverine to be more offensive, or I want my Wolverine... Come on, dude. What is going on? I'm trying to click the power saving. Jesus Christ. Now I can't get off this page. Brother, hub. What the hell? Anyways, you're going to want to answer that question, right? Do you want your Wolverine to be more offensive or more defensive? And honestly, I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think there's a right answer. Maybe with a lot more testing in like a month or two, people will come to more of a conclusion. But I think even then, I think it's going to be maybe like at best like a 60-40, right? Where this build is a little bit better than the other build, but they both still have a lot of value. And so when you look at an offensive build for Wolverine, what does it look like? Well, of course, you need the artifact. Of course, for an offensive build, you're going to want to go Power of Angry Hulk or Binary Power for the ISO 8 set. But then for the CTP, you're going to want to go, booyah, got the clutch win with Hulk. For the CTP, you're going to want to go for a mighty or brilliant CTP of Greed. In my opinion, Greed CTP is the best offensive CTP for Wolverine. Now, one of the biggest aspects of a Greed is the ambush proc. The ambush proc ignores the enemy's damage decreases, which is very good because Wolverine doesn't have that effect on any of his pieces of gear like Spider-Man does or whatever. The other big effect for ambush is reflect reduction. Wolverine doesn't really have to worry about reflect reduction because where he gets most of his damage from, i.e. his 5th skill, is a full iframe. So he shouldn't take any reflect damage at all there. Wow, I got completely blitzed. My Wolverine basically got target farmed. Yeah, I'm getting destroyed. I'm pretty sure this Wolverine has, yep, he's got a Greed. So yeah, the Greed, like the ambush proc of the Greed is not really what makes it so good. The damage reduction, ignoring damage reduction is very good, but it's more about that massive proc that's going to increase your damage, right? So that's what you're basically looking for with the Greed. You're looking for, sure, the ambush proc is nice and it's certainly better than the attack defense roll, but it's really that increased basic damage, right? The heal is nice as well. The guard break immunity is absolutely necessary. The ignore dodge is good, although he has a lot of ignore dodge buffs on his 5th skill. But it's really that proc at the bottom that can scale up to 220% that really makes Wolverine's damage go bonkers, in addition to ignoring the enemy's damage decrease by up to 70%. So you're not going to notice it as much on a Mighty Greed because, again, it rolls much lower, like 60% versus 25%, but it's still a meaningful number, and you're going to feel it when you're running Wolverine in PvP. So that would be the offensive build, is to build him potentially with a defensive ISO 8 set, right, like binary power, but you could still go Power of Angry Hulk. You could go all offense with Wolverine and basically turn him into a hot machete where he basically just shreds everything. However, the shred everything thing only works to an extent, right? Because if you build a character all offense, then they're going to work, and it's going to work as long as the characters don't take a long time to revive, or the characters aren't able to tank you for whatever reason. If they're able to tank you, then you're sort of going to run into issues. And for the most part, I haven't had issues with Wolverine not doing enough damage. I mean, there are a couple of characters here and there, like maybe a Jean Grey with a brilliant egg or something like that, that are able to tank. But for the most part, characters die when my Wolverine anyways, does his 5th skill. So that's where I think the other PvP build comes into place. If you want a more defensive playstyle, if you want a more defensive Wolverine, and that would be to give him something like a brilliant authority with a lot of damage reduction. For this one, like the Greed, you don't want the all attack, all defense. You want that ability. For the Greed, it was ambush. For the authority, it is steal. You want that steal proc roll, and you want it as high as possible. Like the Greed, I don't know how much the mighty authority is going to do, because you can only roll up to, I believe, 25 or 30% steal effect. 30% is not bad, but remember, Wolverine only has 25%, so you want to try to go as high as possible with that steal effect, and this makes the most of his auto healing because you can bounce back up a lot from when this procs, and Wolverine gets hit like crazy, so his authority proc is going to activate. The steal proc is going to activate a lot. The rest of the rolls on the authority, they matter, I guess. You want the most invincibility as possible, and then the more attack you get for the damage received, the better. But really, the most important part is that steal proc at the top. You want that to be as high as possible, and you can see mine isn't as high as it could be. I could get an additional 10%, and who knows, that could actually be the difference maker. But for the rest of the build, you want to just go with as many Odin's Blessings as you can afford, as long as you're including 4 heal Odin's Blessings. The 4 heal Odin's Blessings, in my opinion, are kind of non-negotiable. I guess, unless you're running a very budget build where you're just going to build him with a Greed and then hope that he just shreds through as many targets as possible before he dies, sort of like a suicide bomb, that's fine. That can work. But if you want more longevity, then you're going to want to go with the heal, and then you're going to want to go with a lot of Odin's Blessings. Now, I did say as many Odin's Blessings as possible, and I certainly have enough to equip on him, but I'm choosing to go, again, I'm going ultra defensive. We're going as many HP Urus as possible, because I just prefer this playstyle, right? Having close to 180,000 HP, I think is very, very nice. And then, of course, for the uniform options, you're going to want to go double HP, as high as you can go. You're certainly going to want to go all defense here, absolutely, and you're going to want to go all attack here. So essentially the only place where you can sort of choose what you want to roll for him, if what's not optimal, is either dodge or probably crowd control time. I mean, I guess if you really need the cooldown, but you probably shouldn't need the cooldown if you have a very good build, and you shouldn't need the attack speed, and the movement speed is just not that good. The crowd control time is good, although I know Wolverine does give himself 90% crowd control reduction or debuff duration on his 5th skill. It's really nice to have when he doesn't have that 5th skill active. And it certainly means if you have a high enough debuff reduction, you can see I have 60% debuff duration, you could potentially field a team where, you know, you're using his own lead. Because his lead gives you another 30%. That means you cap out that 75. That means you could run a team without a debuff lead, potentially, because basically, if you have enough debuff reduction, basically what you can do is, look, check this out. So Jean Grey, I have enough debuff reduction, so she's also capped with Wolverine's lead. Now I know you can use Jean Grey's lead, okay, but just pretend Jean Grey didn't have that lead, or whatever. Use another character. Use Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock is going to be capped as well. All my characters are going to be capped when I use Wolverine's lead. So what that means is they can get debuffed, but their debuffs are only going to last for 1/4 of their original duration. So a 1-second debuff lasts for 0.25 seconds. A 2-second debuff lasts for half a second, etc., etc. So that, coupled with the fact that these characters often have cleanse, like he has cleanse on his 2nd skill. He has basically he has a 90% cleanse on his 5th skill. That means you could potentially run a team like this. Again, I mean, you don't necessarily have to do that, obviously, because, well, that's only for supervillains. But yeah, you could field teams like this. So there's actually a lot of flexibility in his build once you start to get the rest of the pieces in place. But I'm really happy with his production so far with an authority. I think the greed is the more flashy option, and who knows, I might switch to a brilliant greed when I get one. But I think if you have the option, like if you have a brilliant greed or a mighty authority, I would say go greed. If you have a brilliant authority but a mighty greed, I would say go authority. Go with whatever CTP between authority and greed you have of the highest caliber. But unfortunately for PvP outside of greed and authority, I don't really think there are any other good options for Wolverine. I think potentially if you wanted to be really spicy and freaky, you could try only a brilliant regeneration with the penetration, right? A 90% roll on the penetration to get that interruption. You could try that, but again, Wolverine with only 25% damage reduction, he's going to take a shit ton of damage. And even though that HP bubble is 35% of whatever his HP is, it's still not enough, right? Remember that Hulk used to be regen, and now everyone has switched from regen to egg because the HP bubble that the egg provides is just not good enough, especially when the bubble doesn't give you super guard break immunity, right? The Vitality proc does give you super guard break immunity, which is why it's good. The only other CTP I would consider in any way, shape, or form for Wolverine for PvP, again, I think it's experimental, like the regen, but I would say potentially an egg. If you wanted to go for I wouldn't say a mighty egg would be good enough, but maybe a brilliant egg could be good enough for him to out heal some of this stuff, some of this damage. But I think at that point, if you're going to go for an egg or for a regen, you're going to want to pair Wolverine with at least one defensive option, i.e. someone giving him damage reduction, either a Colossus type for just flat damage reduction, or if you want it to be a bit more specific because you know that Wolverine takes the majority of his damage and the majority of his hits from characters like Adam Warlock, you could queue in someone like Hela to help him out against that. Obviously, it's not going to work against Jean and Thanos, but it is also going to work against other Wolverines. It's going to work against Spider-Man, etc. So it does have pretty nice coverage. But yeah, that about does it for Wolverine's PvP build and all the tips I have for you. Hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you've seen works for him. Thank you so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.